take a deep breath, take the higher road. That's what they always say, as if they know the way. They won't take it from me. But don't ever doubt yourself, 'cause life ain't just a dream. You make your own, so kick and scream. The people will act with a never-ending force. You never had the chance, so what you waiting for? The day has come, my friend, 'cause this is war. It's time and this is war.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Nurses Out Loud Q&A with the nurses. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton, and I am joined today by Nurse Jody, Nurse Michelle, and our newest co-host here on Nurses Out Loud, Nurse Melissa. Together, we are here to answer your burning questions, address your comments, and provide the support that you need on your healthcare journey. We've heard you loud and clear. You wanted more interactivity, more engagement, and we are here to deliver. We want to hear your stories, your challenges, and help you find the solutions that you're looking for. This is your chance to be a part of the conversation. Each episode, we will be featuring your questions and comments, tackling the topics that matter most to you. From career advice to self-care tips, we are here to empower and uplift our community. So send us your questions, share your experiences, and let us know what you want us to discuss. We are here to create a space where we can all learn, grow, and thrive. Remember, it isn't just about us sharing our knowledge. We want to hear from you. Your voice matters and your experiences are valuable. So send us those emails to nurses@americaoutloud.com. We will be featuring these questions and comments every Friday on this special Q&A episode with the nurses. We encourage all of you to engage in the battle and find your voice in this fight. But until you are able to do that, we will continue to be that voice for you. All right. Well, welcome in Nurse Jody, Nurse Michelle, and Nurse Melissa.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely.
Yes, love it.
All right. So here we are. We're back. We've got some more questions to bring to all of you. So let's go ahead and jump right in. First question that we got, I got this on social media. So anybody that follows me on Facebook, I had posted, I came across this, and I'm just going to pull it up really quickly to kind of reference it. But I posted this form that somebody was talking about, you know, if you want to vaccinate my child, okay, here, doctor, go ahead and fill out this form. And basically what it is it's just a form that is talking about that they have reviewed all of the risks, all of the benefits, all of the ingredients of this drug, or I'm sorry, of this vaccine, and that they feel that this child, that the benefit outweighs the risk. And I'll just read just a small snippet of it. It says, blank my name. I am a physician licensed to practice medicine. I have a thorough understanding of the risks and benefits of all the medications that I prescribe for or administer to my patients. In the case of patient's name, age, blank, whom I have examined, I find that certain risk factors exist that justify the recommended vaccinations. And then they go and ask the physician to list those risk factors. It goes on to include all of the chemicals, preservatives, and fillers in these vaccines, and then asks for the doctor to sign off, basically waiving any liability should an injury occur. I think this is a brilliant form. So I've got it there so that it can be downloaded. So you can follow me on my Facebook or go to my Facebook page and you can download this form to bring into the doctors. I find it very interesting. Nobody has found a physician willing to sign off on this. And that's not surprising, right? What do you guys think about using a form like that?
Yeah, not surprising at all. I mean, I'm amazed when I finally got awake to everything that was going on with the vaccines, because I have a child who's been in the federal vaccine court for 8 years. When I started asking questions of my pediatricians, when I would say, I had one that was a Muslim, and I said, do you know that there's bovine products inside of some of these vaccines? And she was like, what? Didn't even know. She's a frontline vaccinator and she's anti-bovine products. I said, don't you avoid bovine products? And she said, yes. I said, well, if you've injected your kids, you've injected it into your children. And You don't even know that, and you're a frontline vaccinator? Not
Mhm.
surprised. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I
seems like none of
think
them.
that, and we see this also just with pharmaceuticals in general, that a lot of times providers are prescribing things left and right, but they have very little knowledge of how this is working in the body, what the ingredients are, and then they also have a very poor understanding of the potential side effects. And this is one of the reasons why the underreporting rate for vaccine injury is less than 1%, because we have so many providers that they just repeat the same mantras: safe and effective, the science is settled, and they believe it so much that they go out and they get all these vaccines. They give their children all of these vaccines, and they highly recommend it. So when somebody, after having a vaccine, has a seizure or new onset POTS or autoimmune, that is why they're telling them that there is no connection. And a lot of times the patients don't even think, was it the vaccine? Because we know that patients and providers tend to not read these inserts. So I think that this is a really good role as a nurse, because we're educators. Give them the information, provide them with the links of this information. That way they can make their own risk versus benefit assessment and make an informed decision.
And I think it's really interesting too that on this particular post that I had put, somebody had actually chimed in and said that they were taking their child in to get the HPV vaccine. And let me see what she said. She said she brought her son in. She was being pressured to get the HPA vaccine for her son. She calmly asked the doctor to please get the package insert and explain the side effects to her son in detail so that he could decide and make an informed decision. And the doctor became very unhappy. Not surprising, but she returned with the package insert. However, she just handed the insert to this woman and said that she would let her explain it to him. So that's interesting. So she was not even willing to go over and review these in package inserts with somebody she's getting ready to inject.
These inserts are actually really intimidating intentionally. I mean, they fold out to basically 36 inches wide and almost 2 feet high, front and back. That's a lot of information. And there's a lot of medical jargon in there. It's almost like it's intentionally a TMI for your average person to even be able to comprehend. Like, what do these medical terms even mean? What does that mean could happen to me?
Right. And they hand out that, what you need to know sheet with every vaccine, which is basically all that they want you to know. It's definitely not everything you need to know. It's what they want you to know. And that's honestly, as nurses, I can say, I know, at least for myself, that I didn't receive any extensive education on vaccines. I received safe, effective, and necessary. And I think doctors receive little more than that. Can you guys speak to the level of education that you received on vaccines?
Well, as far as me in school, I mean, I think I speak for all the nurses. Again, we were told what the childhood schedule was, and that these are the dates that the child should be vaccinated, and with whatever vaccines that were appropriate for that age, and then what to do if there's an anaphylactic reaction. That's it. Right. And that's something that occurs usually immediately, after the vaccine, after the administration of the vaccine. But I agree. I mean, if our doctor, first of all, the physicians get paid out depending on how many people in their practice are vaccinated, right? This is knowledge now. So if you guys don't know that, this is a fact. Insurance companies pay providers based on, their percentage of vaccination in the practice. That's why you had a lot of doctors refusing to see people during COVID, or a lot of pediatricians that will not accept a child into their practice if you're not going to vaccinate, because it brings down their percentage, and their percentage is a direct correlation to payment. And so I think having this and having them actually look at it, maybe their eyes will be opened and say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that question. I should know it. Why am I pushing it? I think this is a fantastic idea. And it's within your own informed, it's called informed decision making, right? Before you can give consent, you have to be informed and then decide. So yeah. And also too, Nurse Michelle did that awesome program that she spent a lot of time on, the 20 vaccine questions to ask your doctor. We'll throw that in the show notes too. I think it's, definitely. They need to be held accountable.
Kimberly, you asked, what preparation do we all get to be able to actually be intelligent about the subject of vaccines? I mean, I graduated in 1987 or something like that. And so I know for a fact then, and we're talking about that's within a couple of years of that law being passed that completely protected the vaccine distributors. That was not even notified to us at that time when I was in nursing school. Fast forward ahead, I've got a 21-year-old who just graduated nursing school last year, and she can say because she's very informed about vaccines because she's my child, and we have a vaccine injured child in our home. But that girl can attest that a really excellent school did not do anything besides saying, this is the vaccine schedule. It boosts the immune system to make sure that we are protected and society is protected from all these supposedly really dangerous things that once upon a time, all of our relatives if we're all here alive today, it's because our ancestors all had these diseases and lived to tell about it and have children. I mean, they were well enough to make some babies and they kept on having kids. So we forget that. So she went out into the world recognizing as a new student in the modern era, they are not telling them any more than make sure your patients comply.
It's really like a religion. So many people believe that we were all just sick and dying in the streets. And then Big Pharma, our Messiah, they came in and they rolled out all these vaccines, and these vaccines saved us. But we don't really have evidence that the vaccine schedule significantly altered the disease rate in the country. And what actually happened was sanitation. We really, when you think back to like the 1930s and before then, in surgery, surgeons did not know to sanitize equipment. We did not have indoor plumbing. So when you actually look at statistics, you'll see that a lot of these disease processes were way, way on the decline before the vaccines rolled out. And again, I'm not saying that there's so many vaccines out there. I'm not saying that maybe some in some certain situations may be helpful, especially when we're talking about the developing countries where they don't have access to healthcare. But my parents' generation, who are baby boomers, on their schedule, they had about 6 doses. I was born in the 80s. My schedule was around 24 doses. Today, it is well over 72 doses. And we see this significant increase in vaccination after they passed the 1986 Act that allowed for liability immunity from pharmaceutical companies in relation to vaccines.
And many people don't even realize that exists. They don't realize that once that vaccine, like once that COVID vaccine was added to the CDC schedule, that it then removed all liability for all age groups from that. And many people don't even realize that that's a thing.
I'm noticing something. There is momentum growing on this topic because I have been asking this question for 6 years. Those 20 vaccine questions that Jody referenced, they're called 20 vaccine questions for medical professionals because there's so many of them out there that think just because they have a white coat, they must be some superior knowledge on this topic. And we know they're not. But what I do when I'm in public, I'll ask people questions and I'll say, my grandmother's 96, my mom is 76, I am 56. How many vaccines did my grandmother have to have before she was 18? I say the diphtheria vaccine was the only thing she ever had mandated. My mom only had 2, which included the polio vaccine. I had about 4, and I say my kids had about 14. Now, how many do you think my grandkids will have to have before they graduate high school? And I pause and let them have to sit there and think about that. And they naturally want to double the number 14. And so they're blown away when I tell them 72 before the COVID vaccine was added to the schedule, and we're now over 90. And they're like, no way. I'm like, yes way. That's what's made. If you want to comply with the vaccine schedule that the CDC is recommending, That is what your children, my grandchildren, are going to have injected into them. Don't think it doesn't have an effect on their health long term.
Well, exactly. And
also-
then you talk about how many, the autism and asthma and ADD and, confusion of gender. And like, I think all of that is related. Absolutely. Kimberly says a lot of the times that she thinks that we're all injured on some level. And I completely agree with that.
Yeah, when you look at all of the chronic disease that we see in this country that we're really conditioned to just, accept as normal part of society, I don't think vaccines are the only contributing factor there. I think it has a lot to do with our diet, the crap diet that we have, and all of the processed food, the water that we drink, the whatever they're spraying, the chemicals that they're spraying into the air. I mean, listen, they're coming at us from every direction, right? So I don't think it is solely the vaccines, but I think that is a huge component of it. And when you look at the numbers of, and this is when I was pro-vaccine. I talk about this all the time, that I was very not militantly pro-vaccine, but I was pro-vaccine and encouraging vaccination right up until 4 years ago. But I had to ask myself the question after all of this with COVID, like, why am I so pro-vaccine? And it was really just because we were told to be. And, I'm going to sit here and admit that I didn't do any type of deep dive on vaccines or immunizations because I really felt like that was being done by people in that realm, right? That they were doing their due diligence. Well, they're not, or they are, and they don't care to inform the rest of us about the devastating effects of vaccines. But what was really compelling to me was when I found out the instance of autism among the unvaccinated was virtually zero. Virtually zero. So to me, that was pretty compelling information. And I got that from a presentation by Dr. Brian Hooker and Neil Miller, who's a scientific investigative journalist. And it was a fantastic presentation. But when you start to look at the health outcomes of children vaccinated versus unvaccinated, you see that the unvaccinated are far healthier than their vaccinated peers.
Yeah, and people really want to jump you when you say the word autism and you're talking about vaccines. I have to remind them that the Children's Health Defense actually FOIA'd the CDC, and they showed that we want you to present to us all the studies that you did that showed that there was no effect to cause autism after vaccines. There was no studies ever done to support the claim that vaccines do not cause autism. So there were no studies to prove it. So if I'm not mistaken, they were required to take down that statement. They cannot have it on their website anymore that vaccines do not cause autism because they can't prove the claim.
Right.
And if you read this is such a hot topic because I can tell we all just want to get in there. Goodness, I have so much to say, guys. And I think that since I was a nurse for so long and I was mindlessly repeating these mantras, and then my first child, I had him on schedule for the first 18 months. And now learning that I feel like I was lied to in school. It's really something I'm really, really passionate about. But I also want to speak to America's literacy problem. We have a literacy issue in America. The average adult reads at like a 7th or 8th grade level. We know that many people in our country are just not equipped to be able to read and understand a vaccine insert. And when you read these inserts and you look at post-marketing surveillance, known adverse reactions, you are going to see something that says neurological encephalopathy. That is a medical term for brain damage. So when we have so many parents that are like, well, my child was completely fine, and then they regress and they're not making eye contact. They're banging their head into a wall, and then they get diagnosed with autism. But then the medical providers say, well, that would have happened anyway. And they're completely disregarding the fact that brain damage in many of these inserts is listed as a known reaction. And then we're also ignoring the fact that we're giving multiple doses at one time. We don't have any studies showing the safety of that, because when they do these trials, they're testing one vaccine, and the majority of the vaccines on the schedule, they are testing it. They say they are testing it against a placebo, but the definition of a placebo is an inert substance, something that does not have a biological effect on the body, like a saline injection. They're actually using other vaccines that also were not placebo safety tested, or the aluminum adjuvants and other substances that are questionable that are in the vaccine. So without a true saline placebo, we cannot confirm the safety of the product, and we don't know the synergistic effect of having all of this being injected into the body at one time.
And then how do we know if there is an injury that occurs? How do we know which of these vaccines caused it? I mean, we can only introduce one food at a time when they're babies, but we can inject them with 4, 5, 6, whatever they're doing these days, as far as the vaccines. To me, it just doesn't make any logical sense that we would be doing this. And I really kind of kick myself for not thinking of these things as I was injecting babies with 4 shots at a time.
Yeah, when you think about a 2-month-old gets 8 antigens injected at the same time, I've had people reach out to me and tell me about their twins, and one of them had severe reaction after their 2-month checkup. And she's like, well, which one is it that my child's probably allergic to? I said, you will never know. You have to consider that child allergic to all 8 of those antigens, because there is no way for you to solve it. And what you said, Melissa, when you talk about these placebo effect, that they do not use a true placebo. I mean, they're the trial people. We know what a placebo is. Anybody can go Google what the definition of placebo is, but yet they use other vaccines and call it a placebo. It cannot look anything but nefarious. And it looks like, okay, we know this is going to cause certain kind of problems. So let's give another thing that causes the same kind of problem, so that we don't have, so that it looks like we are saying this saline, which it wasn't, caused the same thing. So it has nothing to do with the vaccine. It's nefarious at its outset.
And I do also want to speak to aluminum being a known neurotoxin. So per the FDA's safety limit of aluminum, which is based on a rodent study, they say that that is 5 micrograms per kilogram per day. So if you have an 8-pound infant, that would be 18.18 mics in one day. The vaccination that we give to babies first day of life in our country, one of the only countries in the world that does this, is hepatitis B, and that contains 250 micrograms of aluminum. And it's so bad, guys. It's just unbelievable. And when we give that vaccination on day 1, we don't have a baseline of that infant. So if that infant ends up having a seizure, develops an autoimmune condition later down the road, a lot of times these parents are gaslit, and they're like, well, this would have happened anyway. And when you look at risk versus benefit of something like hepatitis B, we know that hepatitis B, we see that in high risk populations like IV drug users, those that are sexually promiscuous. If the mother is Hep B negative, which we test these moms, and less than 1% of moms are Hep B positive, why would we give this to an infant at birth? It does not make any sense.
It doesn't. And here's something that we don't really talk about very often, is that there've been studies shown that I think it was by age 12 that these children lose about 50 or to 60% of their immunity for hepatitis B. So what's the point? I mean, but before they're 12, they're not even likely, hopefully not going to be in those high risk groups by age 12.
And the CDC has not been able to prove or provide any evidence of hepatitis B spread in schools. Because sometimes what will happen in the hospitals, the nurses will come in the room and they'll say, well, they need to have this for school. But is your newborn infant going to be going to school? Are they going to be walking around and step on an IV needle? And it just goes to make you think about the group think and the lack of any type of critical thinking. And for so long, people who question vaccines, I mean, they actually had changed the definition of anti-vaxxer to anyone who questions the safety or efficacy of a vaccine or questions mandates. That way, if you're speaking about these things, they can write a hit piece about you. And then there's been so much just negative attention in the media about calling people anti-vaxxers left and right. And it is like astonishing to me how effective that was. I know so many people that do not speak out about these known safety issues because they don't want to be labeled an anti-vaxxer.
I'm going to put a homeschool plug in there. You said there is a evidence of a lack of critical thinking. Okay, so we have stopped in generationally. Once upon a time, we were taught formal logic and reasoning. So your child would not graduate middle school without doing basic formal logic and would have gotten another form of more formal logic in the high school level. It is not easy to go through those courses, but there's some fun versions of it that you can actually do with your children to learn fallacies. And it's called the Fallacy Detective. And parents out there who have middle schoolers, you should start doing this as a read aloud in your home in the evenings so that you do not create a part of the problem for our society that hasn't learned how to detect fallacies within arguments and teach them those fallacies and teach them how to do logic and reasoning. So they're part of the critical thinkers of our society, because what Melissa said is definitely bringing to the front the absolute depletion of logic, reasoning, and critical thinking. It's so obviously a problem that it's irrational that we're not having a conversation about it.
Absolutely agree. And there was another comment on this post, which generated quite a few comments actually, but from Deneen. She has a daughter who is due for her meningitis vaccine in a couple of months at age 16. And she said she's freaking out about it. She doesn't know what to do in order to not have her get this vaccine. I just say no. That's my thing. Just refuse. And I will say, if you do have difficulty navigating these types of situations within the medical system, we do offer our advocacy services at Remnant Healthcare. We're happy to step in if you feel uncomfortable advocating for your child. We are happy to step in and be that advocate for you and for your child. But there was an interesting response. Lance Johnson, and he wrote a book, and oh God, forgive me, I can't think of the name of it right now. Does anybody remember the name of Lance's book? It's like the Vax Freedom Guide, I think.
Oh, hold on. I have it here. Hold
Yeah,
on.
you do. I've seen it. I've seen it in your. All right. So Vax Freedom Guide, right. By Lance Johnson. Let me go ahead and I got so excited about trying to figure out the name of the book that I minimized his comments off my screen, but it was really good. So, but go ahead and speak to, what you guys would do in that type of a situation.
Yeah, there's something I can make sure that people just hear this so that they can write it down. If you're ever being forced to get a vaccine, you've got to practice in front of the mirror saying a couple of things, because you really just need to gain some confidence and say a few snarky things. But one of them is the first thing you should ever write in a request, if you're saying you don't want to do it, is one basic sentence, and it's basically that you're going to say, to whom it may concern, this letter is notifying you that I am invoking my right to religious accommodation under Title VII of the U.S. Civil Rights Act. Okay, so anything they read after that, they've already been put on notice. Their little legal affairs department can read that and say, oh, this is an informed person that recognizes they're not asking permission to get out of a vaccine. They are invoking their right to not get a vaccine. And you can have a religion of yourself, and yourself can believe that it's harmful to yourself. So I'm not going to do something intentionally harmful to myself. And it doesn't matter if you think that because I drink coffee or that somebody used to smoke in the past, that I once upon a time thought that was safe for myself. Whatever I think right now is not safe for me, I'm not going to do it. So I'm invoking my right. I'm not asking your permission. And when you ask for a declination form, to decline it, and they say, I don't know what that is. Okay, well, find me somebody who does. And just stand there and look at them, because they do not know anything. These people that are telling you what to do, they are ignorant. So just stand there and be confident, even if you don't feel confident, and make them squirm a little bit.
Absolutely. Okay. And I found Lance's comment. I want to read this real quick, and then we'll go to anyone else has anything to say about this. All right. So Lance says, first off, change your wording. It's not her meningitis vaccine, and she's not due for it. The CDC recommends that she get a meningitis vaccine, and you as the parent do not agree to it. Exemptions are available for her to attend school. And in cases where these exemptions have been eliminated by legislatures that are bought off by the pharmaceutical companies, they still do not own her body, as you stated, Michelle, nor do their demands to poison your child supersede your right as a parent. Say no and never cede authority. And I could not agree more with that. Jody?
Yeah, I completely agree. Just say no. I mean, you have to, develop a backbone, like Michelle said, stand in front of the mirror and repeat it until you believe it. It's always hard to speak up. But when you do and you start using your voice, you're empowered to do it more often. And when you do it, with leading from the heart, instead of your mind where you're just pissed off, you're usually a little bit more well received.
Absolutely. Well, we are coming up on a break. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays on the iHeartRadio network. You can also listen on our media player from any web browser anywhere in the world. We have the best in-class apps available on Apple, Android, or Alexa 24/7. Great Talk Radio. All of our shows go to podcast the following day. You can hear them on apps such as Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, iHeart Podcast, and many more. Be sure to subscribe and rate the show on Apple Podcast for me. Don't forget to check out our online store at americaoutloud.shop, where you can find all of the products that we represent on our network at a discounted rate, including ASEA Redox, which I can personally speak to seeing fantastic results with, including better sleep, increased energy, improved mood, and a decrease in my joint pain. Use promo code OUTLOUD to save 15% off your purchase. I'll catch you on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
It's time and this is what.
Cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, inflammation, and weight. These are all real-world problems that 87% of Americans are struggling with. Often, there are no symptoms, but left unattended, we become inundated with one health problem after another. It's time to fight back with Heal Right. Heal Right is a bar that you eat, but it's food as medicine that addresses the nutritional root cause of health issues in just 8 weeks. Developed by world-renowned scientists and backed by 15 years of research, Heal Right is effective, but it's also delicious and works without additional diet or lifestyle changes. Step out of the statistics and use food as medicine. Visit healright.com/outloud or americaoutloud.shop and use the code OUTLOUD for 20% off.
ASEA believes that inside each of us is the potential to feel our very best. Our redox-based products tap into reserves within you to power your personal well-being. Make our breakthrough products an essential step in fulfilling your greatest potential. ASEA, we power potential. For exclusive savings, use code OUTLOUD to save 15% off your first order today.
Expert opinions, honest debate, and in-depth investigations are what you've come to expect from AmericaOutloud.news. We don't shy away from speaking the truth boldly and plainly. All that's missing is the propaganda that has infected legacy and social media. Get the best of down and dirty, wholesome American speak. Now is our time, my fellow Americans. America Out Loud Talk Radio. Liberty and justice for all.
Welcome back to Nurses Out Loud on America Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. Wherever you're listening from today and whatever you're doing, I thank you for giving me the gift of your time. Be sure to make AmericaOutloud.news your daily stop for all the latest news and happenings. We all must do our part and share the stories, the articles, the podcasts, and videos so we can help secure America's future. If you're just joining us, I'm here with my sister nurses, Jody, Michelle, and Melissa, and we are answering your questions and comments as we do every Friday on this special Q&A episode. Let's jump right back in. All right, ladies. So we have another question here. This is from Janelle. Janelle says that she remembers reading over some articles that she believes they were from Dr. Pierre Corey on how the COVID shot affects our DNA. She wanted to know if I happened to have any articles on hand with easy access for citing. She was not able to find anything and wasn't sure where to turn to. So when I got this, I immediately thought of Melissa, because as Jody so lovingly referred to her in our last episode, we refer to Melissa as like the Dr. McCullough of nursing. She is so data driven and she can just pull this stuff like right out of her head. It's absolutely amazing. Melissa, what do you got for us?
Guys, but I have so much respect for the Frontline COVID Critical Care Alliance. And what I have in front of me is a really wonderful presentation that they did. It is labeled plasmid-derived DNA contamination in mRNA vaccines. And they have, I'm going to send this link to you, Kimberly, to post it. They have a variety of studies cited in this presentation. And it is, I feel like we could do like a whole show just on this. But speaking directly from the insert, something that I've been aware of for some time is it clearly states that they never tested this for genotoxicity, which is basically the effect that it could have on our genome. And we also know, for an example, that these mRNA vaccine sequences, they circulate in the blood, they're found in the plasma. We don't know how long this is in the system for, and we're even finding it in lymphatics several months post-vaccination. And there's quite a bit of information about how, we know that there were a lot of deficits in Pfizer's trial. And one of the controversies is the SV40 sequence, which is said to may have some links to things like cancer. And they're seeing that the levels of SV40 were much higher than what would be the acceptable amount. And the European regulators actually confirmed that Pfizer did not highlight the DNA sequences in the COVID vaccine. So they really weren't doing their due diligence here. And they also omitted regions that are not material to plasmid manufacturing. So there's just so much here, guys. So I'm going to send this over to you, Kimberly, so you can share it. But I also want to mention there's another slide that FLCCC has here about how Moderna patent speaks to the risk of insertional mutagenesis from DNA contamination. So this will be a really great document to review. They even went through, they have snapshots of the studies they're referencing and they're highlighting certain points, but it definitely is a really significant concern here. And I think that people need to be aware of this. That way they have that information for if they get pressured by a provider to get the COVID booster, which unfortunately I'm still hearing of providers offering these shots even to children. And then also just providing this information to your friends and family that have had these vaccinations. I really do believe that on this beautiful earth that God created for us, that there are things that can help to heal the body. But I would definitely be proactive about, supporting your immune system, maybe incorporating some, nutraceuticals and herbs that have things like anti-cancer properties.
Dr. McCullough also did on America Out Loud an entire show on the SV40 gene being associated to this vaccine as well, and that it was discovered, Melissa, like you said. So I'll try and find that citation for us so we can make sure that's in the show notes as well, because he addressed that at length as well.
Yeah, and also Dr. Artis from, if you go to the drartisshow.com, he has some amazing resources too. If you go to COVID resources or patient resources, there's a plethora of information. And don't forget, they're also on after our show. The 4 doctors from Healing for the Ages are on directly after our show, guys. So make sure you're listening to them too.
Stay tuned. Yeah. And we'll make sure that we include all of these links that we're talking about in our show notes. And, another person who actually talks a lot about the DNA plasmid contamination is Dr. Jancy Lindsay. If you're familiar with her work, she speaks at length in a great deal about the DNA plasmid contamination. So I will include a link to her studies and work as well. All right. Well, I think that definitely covered that that portion of it. So let's move on to the next question. This was an interesting one that we got on social media about. So I didn't realize that in the state of Tennessee, where I am currently living, that medical marijuana is actually not legal in the state of Tennessee. I didn't realize that. And so the question was, do we feel that medical marijuana should be legalized in the state of Tennessee? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, ladies. I have my thoughts, but I will share that in just a minute.
Well, I think, yes, it absolutely should be legal. I remember learning in nursing school that marijuana, the schedule of narcotics, Schedule 1 to Schedule 5, I believe. Schedule 1 narcotics were the worst drugs, and no government funding ever went to these drugs to prove their efficacy. So essentially, a lot of our funding, comes from the NIH, and they, disperse that funding to universities and medical institutions to fund research. Well, our government said that marijuana was one of the worst drugs, and there was absolutely zero benefit for anything good to come from it. Essentially, was what they were saying. And I remember just they were saying this because they put it as a Schedule 1 narcotic, right? And this happened, I believe it was in the 60s it started, and that they started criminalizing it and making it be the worst drug out there with no benefit. And that just shows the corruption of our government. First of all, to say that a plant grown in nature that really is not addictive, okay? There are psychosocial components of it that make it addictive. But as far as how it acts in the body, when we talk about detoxing for people that were not, people that wanted to stop it, they don't really have many side effects, and definitely no side effects that require hospitalization. Sometimes now we do see the abuse in the ER with it, with people that, take too much of it, and they come up with like vomiting that doesn't stop. Okay. So that is one of the only side effects that, may require, some nausea medication for you to detox off of it, but it's nothing. So when I found that out, first of all, I thought, wow, this is ridiculous. No wonder why there hasn't been any studies coming out that prove its efficacy. So I remember when I was pregnant with my last child 15 years ago, and I had smoked marijuana, every now and again. If I had a headache, I would take a hit or something instead of taking Tylenol. This is way before I became a nurse. And I was looking up what the harms on pregnancy is. And I could not find anything. And so I wound up with nausea with him or with a headache. I wound up just, smoking, a couple hits here and there, and not taking Tylenol or any other over-the-counter medications. And he was just fine. So he's 6'1", size 13 in men's shoes, and he's 14 years old. So I think he did fine. But yeah, it's the corruption. And we're seeing that more and more with how big pharma is being exposed these last few years. There's a lot of benefits, and especially with our veterans and their PTSD. They have been helped so much from this. It's criminal what we've done.
Exactly. And that's what I think about when I think about how, again, like I said, I didn't even realize that medical marijuana was illegal in this state. And, the benefits of cannabis really, they can't be denied. But I think that it is that big pharma, we've all been brainwashed by big pharma to think, again, like you said, Jody, a plant grown in nature is somehow more dangerous than, say, a synthetic opiate that we would grow in a lab, like say, for example, fentanyl, right?
Yeah.
Fentanyl is like the number one protocol drug used now. If you go into like the ICUs, just about every patient is on fentanyl. Do we think that there's a coincidence that that is also the number one drug that is pouring over our borders?
Absolutely. You know, the hospital that I work at is only a couple hours away from the border. And just recently we had a patient, somebody pulled up in front of the ER and they had administered Narcan to him, and he still wasn't coming about. We, you know, brought in his dead, lifeless body. And just a little bit later, after he felt good, he literally got up and walked out. Like, you know, and it's just like, oh my gosh, dude, you just died. You just died and you're ready to go back and get your fix again. Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, and it's awful. Like you said, it's criminal what they're doing, denying people, like cancer patients, or even people with anxiety and depression. They go right for the SSRI when it could be very easily managed and treated with cannabis. I mean, it's shown to lower blood pressure, it reduces inflammation. It actually has cancer fighting properties to it. It can treat gastrointestinal disorders, anxiety, depression. It can also help to prevent relapse in drug and alcohol addiction, interestingly enough. But so it's very interesting. Yes, I think we have to go back to everything in moderation. Can it have negative effects, and can it be addictive? Of course. But so can a lot of other things. I don't think it's any more dangerous than alcohol. I am not like, I don't have any skin in the game. I actually don't like marijuana. I've smoked it before. I don't personally like the way that it makes me feel. So I have no skin in the game on whether or not we, make this available for recreational use. I could care less. I don't use it. I don't care for it, but I'm not opposed to it because again, it's a plant that is grown in nature that has very, really no significant risk to it other than, again, everything in moderation. And it has benefits that just can't be denied. That can't be
exactly. And you can't talk about cannabis. You can't say that alcohol is better than cannabis. Right. It absolutely, hands down, kills and destroys more lives, but mind, body, and spirit than cannabis ever will. So if we're going to allow alcohol, which we should, everybody should have a say in what they want to do. I think, I mean, our government just needs to be dismantled. Yeah, I'm just so over it.
I don't have a whole bunch of knowledge on this topic, but I do have a relative who had a child who was severely handicapped from birth. And I want to remind everybody that a parent knows that child more than anybody else. Nobody else is a more professional on the knowledge of that child. And this mother, doing her research, looking desperately for help, found help in medical marijuana. And it was the only thing that stopped nonstop all-day seizures. The only way this child could stop, all the drugs the pharmaceutical companies had available for her could not stop the continual damage to this girl's brain. And it changed her life. And they had to leave the state of Georgia to go to, I don't know if it was Colorado or somewhere, out Midwest, to be able to go and get access to it. And they said it was a major change. So that's a testament alone of a family that is anti, getting high on drugs. They don't even think of it that way. They saw the medicinal benefits and went for it and used it, and it worked.
Yeah. And in Parkinson's disease too, it has shown significant improvement for Parkinson's patients. So it's definitely something that if not for I think it should be legalized for everyone, in my opinion. But most certainly for medicinal purposes, absolutely.
Yeah. And let me add here, there's actually American Cannabis Nurses Association.org. So if you go to cannabisnurses.org, they have a whole association that, is wanting to provide a practice, advocacy, collaboration, education, research, and policy development.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, we'll include that in the show notes as well. All right. So we've got another question here. Tim writes, what are y'all's thoughts on the FDA Ivermectin lawsuit? I can't believe they got away with telling the world you're not a horse for 3 years. I'm sure we all have something to say about this.
That probably was one of the things that really made me aware that the Instagram people are communists and were coming after me. I could not believe how I had to fortify myself with facts. And I wonder where all these people went that really were attacking me and threatening my license and things like that, just because I was sharing information that well-published doctors who'd researched the data. So I'm used to weaponizing for things like that. So I'll create these facts after I get them, and I have them pre-written so that the next time I end up in another argument about this, I have it. And I had some information that was, one of them was, ivermectin is not a veterinarian med. It is a world-renowned WHO most valuable med in the world kind of med for humans. Aspirin is also used in animals. Does that make it a veterinarian med? And I also gave them, the NIH considers ivermectin equivalent to remdesivir as a treatment option for COVID. And I showed them the link where you can go to table 2E called characteristics of antiviral approved or under evaluation COVID-19 treatment. So it's like, okay, you go deal with the NIH if you have a problem with it. And then Merck, the maker of ivermectin, is also the maker of the new COVID pill at the time called molnupiravir. Just so you know, that particular drug was actually created for equine horse encephalitis and is now being used for humans. But ivermectin was actually made for humans and is also used for horses. So one of them doesn't have, but one of those doesn't have the ability to make Merck rich anymore, and that would be ivermectin.
Exactly, because ivermectin, pennies on the dollar, right? But we've known for decades, this is a medication that has been safely used in humans for decades, right? It has a higher safety profile than an aspirin or a Tylenol. It is an extremely, incredibly safe medication. And when they started demonizing this medication is when I really started to pay attention and open my eyes to what was happening and realizing that, the only way that they can push this vaccine under an EUA or an emergency use authorization, there can be no other treatment for COVID in order for that EUA to be valid. So it's really not difficult to see what was happening, but it should be absolutely criminal what they were doing. And the FDA was in essence practicing medicine at this point when they're telling people, hey, you're not a horse, y'all, don't take this medication. Who is the FDA? The FDA is not a doctor. They don't have a license to practice medicine. And who are they to step in and tell these doctors who have, by the way, always had the ability and autonomy to use drugs off label? That's always been a thing. There's never been any problem with that. But again, ivermectin on the WHO's list of the world's most essential medications, right? It won the Nobel Prize.
Right.
And this may surprise people. Here's some drugs that are used for animals: fentanyl, ketamine, and tramadol. Have you ever been prescribed those for yourself? Of course you have. Those are drugs used in the hospital every single day on humans. But why did we not have the FDA coming out on the jugular, for anybody saying fentanyl isn't an animal drug or ketamine isn't? We know that we use these drugs across species, and yet they came after us, which made it clear yet again when we talked about it on last week's show with Jody. Is it really evil versus good? It has to be evil to shut down a safe drug that looks like it could help in a pandemic. After all, if the whole world is having to be shut down because this big, bad, scary COVID's going around, why wouldn't we throw at them anything that could possibly work that's considered safe and has been around that long?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to, let people know, I believe it was on March 22nd, Mary Talley Bowden, she's a doctor, Dr. Paul Merrick and Dr. Pierre Corey with the Frontline COVID Care.
And Dr. Robert Apter also.
And Dr. Robert Apter. Yeah. So they released so they sued the FDA, and in her post, she states, FDA loses its war on ivermectin and agrees to remove all social media posts and consumer directives regarding ivermectin and COVID, including its most popular tweet in history. You are not a horse. You are not a cow. Seriously, you're all stop it. Back in August of 21, they posted this. The FDA did. And she goes on to say that this landmark case sets an important precedent in limiting FDA overreach into the doctor-patient relationship, like Kimberly said. I did a post on this as well, and it went viral. And a lot of people were saying too little, too late. Many people died. And I understand that. I mean, trust me, I risked my whole nursing career and my life and my livelihood to expose this. When my coworker in the hospital wanted to take ivermectin, and the pharmacist came up and said, and I recorded her and released it virally to the world, that if she prescribes this, she cannot prescribe ivermectin for anything other than lice or scabies. And I just thought, oh my gosh. So this is really near and dear to my heart. I had to go in front of the nursing board to speak about this. We're in deposition phase with HHS over this, with my lawsuit. So I just want to encourage people. And I told them, I understand the pain and the anger, because trust me, I experienced a lot of it. But we have to understand that our court system takes a while to go through the process, and we're in the process. And that's why I think for all of us, we really felt this year in our spirit, right, ladies, that like this is the year for the truth. This is the year that all of this stuff is going to come to the forefront, and this case is no different. So, I do understand that they did criminalize it in many regards, maybe criminalizing it isn't the right word, but
Demonize.
this was not like this big policy. This was word of mouth. And that's what my lawsuit is aimed at. It's saying, okay, HHS, you said no to ivermectin. Where's written policy? Or was it just a bunch of phone calls? Because that's what happened. It was a bunch of phone calls that, people received or talking tos from their medical director, because that medical director had a phone call from somebody in the higher ups that said, you better tell your doctors not to prescribe this, not to even write the dang order for it, or else they're going to lose their job. Well, now it's in a federal judge's hand to decide, what was it nefarious? Okay, show us the policy and your evidence and your science saying that this was harmful to people, So there's a lot coming out.
Yeah, there was a lot of news that was coming out all the time saying, oh, all these people are presenting to the emergency room with severe reactions to ivermectin. It's like, show me the data. I hope it shows up. I hope that comes out in your case, Jody, because they better be ready to say it was advertised on these media outlets. Where's the proof that these media outlets, where'd they get that from, that made them say that all these people were coming into the ER supposedly in peril? And every hospital patient that I had to fight for all over the country, it didn't matter if it was a free red state or a very lockdown blue state, every single nursing supervisor, every single person all the way up to the CEO would not allow a patient to take a chance and had the right to try law used, that they could try ivermectin if they wanted to. And the CEOs, I'd say to them, it's up to you now. You're the last place where I have to go to say this patient wants the right to try this med. And the answer was always no, even with litigation threat.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think it's clear that we feel all three very strongly about the ivermectin. And like Jody said, I think that the truth is going to start to come to surface this year. I have no doubt. And we will be seeing many more victories. But I'm very thankful to Dr. Mary Telly Bowden, Dr. Robert Apter, Dr. Paul Merrick, and Dr. Pierre Corey for their courage and tenacity and seeing this case through. And that is all the time that we have for today, friends. But remember, we are here on the air 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can also catch the encore at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please be sure to tune in and listen to myself and my amazing sister nurses. As we walk you through all of these hot topics, we will empower you with information and education. We will advocate and we will stand in the gap for you because we are nurses and this is what we do. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton, and you can find me here every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. Until next time, be safe, be well, and God bless. Remember, we are in a war for truth. We are putting out a bounty on the real misinformation and exposing the purveyors of propaganda. No topic is off limits as we shine our lights and expose the darkness.
It's time